Good morning, grade 12. I hope you had a lovely weekend and that you rested. Um, just a reminder that we'll send out a timetable every week, and as far as possible, try and stick to that timetable. It's to assist you guys just to organize your day and not spend too much time on one subject and too little time on another subject. But yeah, in terms of economics, last week what we started looking at was our perfect markets. So just a quick recap. Perfect markets, there's a large number of competitors selling a homogeneous product, which means it's exactly the same. So it doesn't matter where the consumer buys the product from, it will be the same and there's a specific market price. So if we look at the graphs like we're going to do today, remember that a perfect market, the revenue curve, average revenue is equal to marginal revenue is equal to the market price. So there's one horizontal line on the graph, and it's the only market structure that looks like this. So if in a test or exam you are given a graph, in order to identify which market structure that graph is for, look at the revenue curve. If there's only one revenue curve and it's a straight line, you know it can only be a perfect market. Obviously, the imperfect markets we'll start dealing with once we're done with perfect markets. So the next thing you need to be able to do is to calculate and to recognize what profit the business is making. So here we are looking at the individual businesses graph, and you must be able to say just by looking at it whether it's economic profit, normal profit, or economic loss. And then also be able to calculate it. So what do we look at in order to determine the profit situation? The position of your average cost curve in relation to your market price will determine whether you're making a profit or a loss. So please remember the standard rule: as long as your revenue is higher than your cost, so your revenue curve at equilibrium is above the cost curve, you're making economic profit. If the revenue curve is touching the cost curve, you're making a normal profit. And if the revenue is below the cost curve, you're making an economic loss. So I will show you on the next graph, but to calculate the total revenue, you're looking at the average revenue multiplied by the quantity. So, and for the total cost, you're looking at the average cost multiplied by the quantity. So let's have a look at your graph. If we have a look at the graph now, so what you first have to do is identify the equilibrium point. So I'm going to do that in pen for you. As I said previously, equilibrium point we figure out according to the production rule. Production rule says where MC equals MR. So that must be this point here. Mark it with a big dot and an E. Excuse my untidiness. My writing with the mouse is not so good yet. So I'm going to do an example. I'm going to fill in amounts here. So let's say our market price was 10 Rand. Whoops. And your equilibrium quantity Q was 50 units. And basically what you have to do, once you've figured out equilibrium, so your first step, figure out equilibrium. There you go, we've got it. So you've figured out the market price that you will receive and the equilibrium quantity that the business will produce. So your total revenue, we said, is your average revenue at equilibrium multiplied by the quantity. So total revenue, please excuse my writing, is the price, 10 Rand, multiplied by quantity of 50, which is 500 Rand. And remember, profit is equal to total revenue minus your total cost. Well, now if we have to look at total cost, we need to look at your total or your average cost at equilibrium. So that is why draw the dotted line all the way down to this axis. Where it intersects your average cost curve, that is where you read the cost off. So once again, draw a dotted line towards the price axis. Let's say it was 8 Rand there. So now your total cost would be 8 Rand, average cost, multiplied by equilibrium quantity, which is 15. So your total cost is 400 Rand. To get to your profit, you say total revenue 500 minus total cost of 400 equals 100 Rand. So let's just recap the basics of it. Number one, identify equilibrium. Number two, read off average revenue at equilibrium. Number three, read off average cost at equilibrium, and then do your calculations. So substitute into the formula. To be able to figure out your different profit situations, you're always going to look at the AC curve in relation to this horizontal line, your revenue curve. So in this case, if we look at equilibrium, which curve is above? Here's your average cost, here's your average revenue. So average revenue is more than your average cost, which means you're going to make an economic profit. I will show you over the next few slides how it can look different. Please go and draw yourself a few graphs and put random amounts in on these axes and do the calculations. You must be able to show on a graph what is the cost area, what is the profit area, what is the total revenue. So the total revenue area would have been the pink block and the blue block. Practice this, it can get confusing, and it is asked in every test, every exam. So you will be examined on this. So let's have a look at the different profit situations before I show you on a graph. Normal profit is total revenues equal to total costs. Remember, for economists, we take into account our implicit costs as well. So the normal profit also includes the amount that the entrepreneur would pay himself. And that would happen where your marginal cost is exactly equal to your marginal revenue. So at equilibrium, your cost curve and your revenue curve is at that same point. An economic profit is where your average cost curve, like in the previous graph, is lower than your market price. And then an economic loss is where the minimum profit is higher than the market price. So let's have graphs. So looking at economic profit, you can see here, I said you must look at the AC curve. So AC in relation to AR. At equilibrium, AC is below AR. So therefore, they're making an economic profit. They can ask you in a test or exam to identify the area for cost, for revenue, and for profit then. So let's have a look. Let's just talk our way through it again. I said step one, identify your equilibrium. Equilibrium is where MC is equal to MR E1. So your equilibrium price is P1, equilibrium quantity is Q1. The total revenue area is average revenue multiplied by the quantity. So it's the whole block from, I'm going to try and highlight it for you. In blue. So it's from O to P1, across to E1, down to Q1, and back to O. So you could either shade it, like I've done in the color now, or you could name it, and you would name it 0, P1, E1, Q1. Then, if we look at the total cost area, I'll highlight in red. Now we are only looking at the average cost, which is here at point M, multiplied by the quantity. So here, your cost area would be 0, C1, M, Q1, and back to 0. So only this little block at the bottom. And then obviously your profit amount, which we can do in green, would be the difference between these two, which is this green block. It's not dark enough, I'll pick another green. So from P1 down to C1, M, E1, and P. So they can either ask you to name it or to shade it. Make sure you are comfortable doing both. We look at normal profits, like I said here, the first identify your equilibrium point, MC equal to MR, so it's at point E2. And then you can see that your average cost curve is touching this revenue curve. So that means they are equal and we are making normal profit. For economic loss, your average cost curve will lie above your average revenue curve. So now you can see the equilibrium point has been identified as E3. And if we look here, your cost curve lies above your revenue curve. So those are the three profit situations. What I want you to do today is to draw out these three graphs that I've shown you: economic profit, normal profit, economic loss. So draw them out and do the calculations, and next to the graph, name the total revenue area, the total cost area, as well as the total profit area. So here is on one graph. As I said, it's the position of the average cost curve that determines whether the business is making a profit or loss. So in economic loss, in this graph, as your equilibrium point. Normal profit is where average cost is equal to average revenue. Economic loss, your average cost is above average revenue. And economic profit, your average cost is below average revenue.